The stars had never looked so close. Captain Taman Park stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise and watched the massive station grow larger on his screens. His hands were sweating inside his gloves. After 200 years of looking at the night sky and wondering if anyone else was out there, humanity finally had its answer. They were not alone. The Council Station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched across space like a small city, with ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports. Taman had studied the files Earth had received, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. Each ship was unique. Some looked like crystals. Others moved like living creatures. None of them looked like the Horizon's Promise, with its simple metal hull and basic design. Ambassador Sora Kim walked onto the bridge. She wore a formal suit, and her face was calm, but Taman could see the tension in her shoulders. This meeting would decide humanity's future in the galaxy. If they made a good impression, Earth might join the Council. If they failed, humanity would remain alone among the stars. "They're ready for us," Sora said quietly. "How do I look?" "Like someone who can speak for our entire species," Taman replied with a small smile. Engineer Nari Choi looked up from her station. She had been checking the ship's systems for the 5th time that hour. "All systems are good, Captain. We're ready to dock." The docking process was smooth. The Council had sent detailed instructions, and Nari followed them perfectly. Within an hour, Taman and Sora were walking through the station's corridors. Aliens of every kind passed them by. Some stopped to stare at the humans. Others ignored them completely. Taman heard whispers in languages he did not understand. The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from dozens of species sat in a circular room that rose up like a tower. At the center stood High Counselor Vex Thar, a tall reptilian creature with golden scales and eyes that seemed to see everything. He looked at the humans the way someone might look at an interesting bug. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Vex Thar said. His voice was translated instantly by the station's systems. "You have traveled far to reach us. Tell us about your species." Sora stepped forward and began to speak. She talked about Earth's history, about humanity's struggles and achievements. She spoke about art and science, about the wars humans had fought and the peace they had built. The council listened, but Taman could see doubt in many of their faces. To them, humans were primitives who had stumbled onto faster-than-light travel by accident. The meeting lasted for hours. The council asked questions. Some were polite. Others were insulting. One representative asked if humans still killed each other over resources. Another asked if they had learned to control their violent impulses. Sora answered each question with patience and dignity. Finally, Vex Thar stood. "The council will consider your petition for membership. For now, you may remain at the station as our guests. We will." An alarm screamed through the chamber. Red lights flashed. The translation system announced something in a dozen languages at once, but the meaning was clear. Emergency. Danger. Evacuate. Taman's military training kicked in immediately. "What's happening?" A council technician, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, spoke rapidly. "Reactor breach. In the lower levels. The containment field is failing. If it explodes, the entire station will be destroyed." "How long do we have?" Taman asked. 20 minutes. Maybe less. "We're evacuating everyone to the ships." "Can you stop it?" Sora asked. The technician's body flickered with what might have been despair. "No. Our engineers are already fleeing. The radiation levels are too high. Anyone who goes down there will die." Taman looked at Nari. The engineer was already reading the technical data on a nearby screen. Her eyes moved quickly, calculating and analyzing. She looked at Taman and nodded once. "We can try," Taman said. Vex Thar turned to him. "What?" "My engineer and I. We can try to fix it." "You don't understand," the technician said. "The radiation will kill you in minutes. Then we'll work fast," Nari said simply. She was already moving toward the exit. Sora grabbed Taman's arm. You don't have to do this. Yes, we do, Taman said. If we want them to see us as equals, we need to show them what humans can do. The next 36 hours became a blur. Taman and Nari descended into the station's lower levels, wearing radiation suits that were already registering dangerous levels. The reactor room was a nightmare of heat and light. Alien technology surrounded them, systems they barely understood. But humans had one advantage. They were stubborn. When the containment field generators failed, Nari rebuilt them, using parts from the Horizon's promise. When the cooling systems shut down, Taman manually rerouted power from non-essential areas. They worked without sleeping, without stopping, without giving up. Other engineers joined them. A brave few from different species, who decided that if these primitive humans were willing to die to save the station, they should help. Together, they fought against time and physics. Nari's hands were burned from handling hot components. Taman's radiation exposure climbed higher and higher. After 36 hours, the reactor stabilized. The danger passed. Taman and Nari collapsed on the floor of the reactor room, too exhausted to move. Medical teams rushed in to treat them. When Taman woke up in the medical bay, Vex Thar was standing beside his bed. The High Counselor looked different now. The dismissive expression was gone. In its place was something like respect. You saved 47,000 lives, Vex Thar said quietly. Beings from 12 different species. You nearly died doing it. We did what anyone would do, Taman said. No, Vex Thar replied. You did what humans do. You saw a problem that seemed impossible, and you fixed it anyway. He placed a clawed hand on Taman's shoulder. The Velkari never forget a debt. If humanity ever needs help, you need only ask. I swear this personally. The Council granted humanity provisional membership, but with restrictions. Humans would be confined to their home system for now. Too unpredictable, they said. Too dangerous to let loose in the galaxy. Taman accepted the restrictions with a smile. He had heard Vex Thar's promise, and he knew something the Council did not yet understand. Humans always remembered who stood with them, and they always paid their debts. 50 years changed everything and nothing at all. Earth remained caged in its own solar system, watching the galaxy move forward without them. The Council had made its decision clear. Humanity could trade with other species, but they could not expand beyond their own star. They were still too young, too unpredictable, too human. Admiral Jiho Lee stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station and remembered his mentor. Captain Taman Park had died 5 years ago. Old and tired, but still believing that humanity deserved more. Before he died, Taman had told Jiho something important. They will need us someday. When that day comes, be ready. Jiho had spent 30 years making sure humanity was ready. The Council thought they were keeping humans contained, but they were really giving Earth time to prepare. While other species bought and sold human innovations for profit, human engineers were learning how the galaxy really worked. While Council diplomats smiled and made promises they never kept, human intelligence officers were watching and listening. Ambassador Sora Kim was still serving Earth, though she was old now and walked with a cane. She had spent 5 decades dealing with the Council's politics, and it had taught her patience. She visited Jiho at the command center every week, and they would talk about the state of the galaxy. The Hiveborn are moving again, Sora said, sitting down slowly in the chair across from Jiho's desk. They've taken 3 more systems in the past month. Jiho pulled up the star maps. The Hiveborn Empire was spreading like a disease across the eastern spiral arm. They were an insectoid species with a collective mind, and they conquered through overwhelming numbers and psychic control. Their queen mind could dominate the thoughts of most species, turning entire populations into slaves. The Council still refuses to act, Jiho said. It was not a question. They debate endlessly while worlds fall, Sora replied with disgust. Some species even trade with the Hiveborn, believing they can buy safety. In her laboratory on Mars, Dr. Hana Song was making a discovery that would change everything. She had been studying the hive-born psychic frequency for years, trying to understand how their queen mind controlled so many beings at once. What she found shocked her. Humans were immune. Not resistant, not partially protected. Completely immune. Something about the human brain structure made it impossible for the hive-born to take control. When Hana reported this to Jiho, he immediately understood what it meant. Humanity had a weapon that no other species possessed. Yuna Park, Taemin's granddaughter, worked in Earth's intelligence division. She had inherited her grandfather's stubbornness and his belief in doing what was right. Her network of informants spread across Council space, gathering information that Earth needed to survive. Most Council species still treated humans like curious children, never suspecting that those children were watching everything they did. One night, Yuna brought Jiho information that made his blood run cold. The hiveborn were planning something massive. Their fleet movements suggested a major offensive, and the target was not some outer colony world. They were going after the Council homeworlds themselves. How certain are you? Jiho asked. 90%. Yuna replied. They're using a hidden wormhole network. They'll bypass all the Council's defensive lines and strike directly at the core worlds. Which world is the primary target? Yuna pulled up the projection. A single world glowed red on the map. Velkara Prime. The Velkari homeworld. Vexthar's home. 4 billion lives. Jiho felt something cold settle in his chest. 50 years ago, Vexthar had promised to help humanity if they ever needed it. The old Velkari was still High Counselor, still leading the Council with wisdom and honor. He was also one of the few Council members who had continued to advocate for lifting Earth's restrictions. Sora called for an emergency council session. She presented Yuna's intelligence to the assembled representatives and begged them to prepare their defenses. The response was exactly what Jiho had expected. Laughter. Mockery. Dismissal. Humans offering military advice? How amusing, said a council representative from the Krell species. Next, they will offer to teach us philosophy. Your intelligence is clearly wrong, another said. The hiveborn would never dare attack Council space directly. Vexthar stood and tried to speak in humanity's defense. But even he was outvoted. The Council adjourned without taking any action. Sora returned to Earth, furious and helpless. Jiho had been preparing for this moment for decades. Earth's shipyards had been building vessels in secret, using human designs that the Council would have banned if they had known about them. Humanity's approach to warfare was different from the galaxy's civilized standards. Humans did not believe in fair fights. They believed in winning. The human fleet consisted of 300 warships. They were smaller than Council vessels but faster and more maneuverable. Each ship carried weapons that the Council considered barbaric. Nuclear missiles, kinetic kill vehicles, chemical weapons. Humanity had looked at the galaxy's rules of war and decided that survival was more important than being polite. Commander Jisoo Han led the Marine divisions. She had trained 20,000 soldiers in boarding tactics and close combat. While Council species fought their wars from a distance, humans had never forgotten how to fight face to face. Jisoo's Marines were ready to take the battle directly to enemy ships. Pilot Do-Hyun Shin was the best fighter pilot in Earth's Navy. He had spent 15 years practicing maneuvers that other species said were impossible. He had also spent those years ignoring safety regulations that he thought were stupid. His fighter squadron was small but deadly. As the weeks passed, Yuna's intelligence proved accurate. The hiveborn were gathering their fleet at the hidden wormhole. They would strike soon. Jiho brought his senior officers together for a final meeting. The Council won't listen, he said. They think we're primitive and paranoid. They're going to let billions die because they're too proud to accept a warning from humans. So what do we do? Jisoo asked. Jiho looked at the star map showing Velkara Prime. He thought about Taemin saving the Council station 50 years ago. He thought about Vexthar's promise. He thought about what it meant to be human. We honor our debts, Jiho said quietly. We prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. When the Hiveborn attack, we go to Velcara Prime. We don't ask for council permission. We don't wait for approval. We just go. That will violate every treaty Earth has signed, said one of his officers. Yes, it will. Jiho agreed. And I don't care. 50 years ago, the Velcari stood with us when we had nothing. Today, we stand with them. Sora heard about the plan and came to see Jiho one last time before he left. She looked at him with sad, knowing eyes. This could start a war with the council, she said. Then we'll fight that war too, Jiho replied. But not today. Today, we save our friends. The fleet prepared in silence. 300 ships. 90,000 human sailors. They all knew they might not come back. They all knew the council might turn on Earth for this violation. None of them cared. The order went out across all channels, encrypted so only human ships could read it. Be ready. When they call, we answer. The Hiveborn came like a plague of stars. Their fleet emerged from the hidden wormhole at the edge of Velcari space, 3,000 ships strong. Each vessel was organic, grown rather than built. And they moved through space with an alien grace that was beautiful and terrifying. The Queen Mind directed them all. Billions of drones thinking as one. High Counselor Vexithar was in his office when the alarms began. He was old now, his golden scales dulled by age, but his mind was still sharp. He looked at the tactical displays and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. The Hiveborn had done the impossible. They had bypassed every defensive line and arrived directly at Velcara Prime. 4 billion Velcari lived on the planet below. Billions more throughout the system. The Council fleet was scattered across dozens of systems, too far away to respond in time. Even if they began moving now, they would not arrive for days. By then, Velcara Prime would have fallen. The planetary defense fleet fought bravely but uselessly. The Hiveborn swarmed over them like insects over food. Their psychic attacks paralyzed Velcari crews, turning proud warriors into helpless victims. Ship after ship went silent as the Queen Mind took control of their thoughts. Vexthar watched his world dying. The council chambers were in chaos. Representatives screamed at each other, demanding action while doing nothing. Some were already fleeing the station. Others called for surrender. None had answers. The communication officer, a young Velcari named Kresh, turned to Vexthar with desperate eyes. High Counselor, we're receiving evacuation orders from the council. We need to leave now. No. Vexthar said quietly. This is my world. These are my people. I will not abandon them. Vexthar said. But sir, there's nothing we can do. Vexthar looked at the communication console. An old memory surfaced. From 50 years ago, when 2 humans had nearly died, saving a station full of strangers. He remembered a promise he had made to a human captain. The Velcari never forgot a debt. If humanity ever needed help, they only had to ask. But what if it worked the other way? What if Velcari needed help? Kresh, Vexthar said slowly. Open a channel to Earth. Maximum priority. Encrypt it with the High Council codes. Earth? Kresh looked shocked. Sir, they're confined to their system. They have no military capability to open the channel, Vexthar commanded. When the channel connected, Vexthar spoke directly to Admiral Jiho Lee. The human admiral appeared on the screen, and Vexthar saw in his eyes that Jiho already knew what was happening. High Counselor, Jiho said. We've been monitoring the situation. Then you know my world is dying, Vexthar said. His voice was steady, but barely. 50 years ago, I made you a promise. I said if humanity ever needed help, you only had to ask. Today, I am asking. I am calling upon the debt. Please. Jiho's face showed no emotion. We'll be there in 6 hours. 6 hours? That's impossible. The fastest ships in the galaxy would take. The channel closed. Vexthar stood in silence, wondering if he had just made a fool of himself. What could humanity do? They were confined to one system. They had no experience with galactic warfare. They were primitives playing at being civilized. Then Kresh made a sound of pure shock. "High Counselor, you need to see this." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Ships emerging from FTL at the edge of the system. Not a few ships, not a small fleet. 300 warships, all broadcasting human identification codes. They had appeared out of nowhere, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. The Council emergency channel exploded with voices. Representatives demanded to know what was happening. How had humanity moved a fleet across the galaxy without authorization? Where had they gotten those ships? Why had nobody known about this? Jiho's voice cut through the chaos, calm and cold. "This is Admiral Jiho Lee, of the Earth Defense Fleet. 50 years ago, High Counselor Vexthar saved human lives. Today, we return the favor. All human ships, engage the enemy. Show no mercy." The council chamber erupted in arguments. Representatives shouted about treaty violations, about unauthorized military action, about humanity being too dangerous to trust. Vexthar ignored them all. His eyes were locked on the tactical display, watching the human fleet race toward Velkara Prime. The Hiveborn detected the human ships and redirected a third of their fleet to intercept. 1,000 Hiveborn vessels against 300 human ones. The Queen Mind sent out her psychic assault, the same attack that had paralyzed every other species she had encountered. Nothing happened. For the first time in the Queen Mind's existence, she felt confusion. The human minds were there. She could sense them, but she could not touch them. They were like smooth stones in a river, impossible to grip. Her psychic attacks rolled off the humans without effect. The human fleet did not slow down. They did not call for negotiations. They simply attacked. Captain Minho Kang commanded the Retribution's Edge, one of Earth's new warships. He had been waiting his entire career for this moment, to show the galaxy what humans could do when someone they cared about was in danger. "All weapons, fire at will," Minho ordered. "Remember, these things hurt our friends. Make them pay for it." Human missiles streaked through space. Not the elegant energy weapons the Council favored. Simple, brutal nuclear warheads that the galaxy had banned centuries ago as too barbaric. The Hiveborn ships, with their organic hulls, discovered that nuclear fire did not care about being civilized. Explosions blossomed across space. Hiveborn vessels died by the dozens. The Queen Mind reeled, trying to understand what was happening. These creatures should have been easy prey. Instead, they fought with a ferocity she had never encountered. On the ground, Commander Jisoo Han was preparing her Marines for boarding actions. While Council species fought their wars from a safe distance, humans had a different philosophy. If you wanted to win a war, you had to look your enemy in the eye. "Listen up," Jisoo told her soldiers. "Those bugs out there are trying to enslave our allies. They think their psychic powers make them invincible. They're about to learn that humans don't have psychic powers. We have guns, and we're really good at using them." Pilot Do Hyun Shin launched his fighter from the carrier Defiance. His squadron of 30 fighters accelerated toward a Hiveborn command ship. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of any human vessel. Do Hyun smiled inside his helmet. "Remember, guys," he said to his squadron, "the bigger they are, the more satisfying it is when they explode." The fighters wove through Hiveborn defensive fire with maneuvers that violated every safety protocol in the book. 3 fighters were destroyed, but the rest broke through. Do Hyun armed his missiles, targeted the command ship's brain core, and fired everything he had. The command ship died, and with it, 200 Hiveborn drones that depended on it for coordination. The Queen Mind felt pain for the first time in centuries. Back on the Council station, representatives watched in horror and fascination. These humans were fighting like demons, using tactics that were brutal and effective. When a human ship was damaged, instead of retreating, it would accelerate toward Hiveborn vessels and detonate its reactor, taking enemies with it. "They're insane," one representative shouted. They're using their own ships as weapons. They're winning, Vexthar said quietly. The battle raged for hours. Human ships died, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect a world that was not even their own. But for every human ship destroyed, 10 hive-born vessels fell. The humans fought with a desperation and fury that the civilized galaxy had forgotten was possible. Finally, as the human fleet closed on Velkara Prime itself, the hive-born fleet began to retreat. The Queen Mind, ancient and powerful, made a decision she had never made before. She fled. These creatures, these humans, were too dangerous. They could not be controlled, could not be broken, could not be stopped. When the last hive-born ship vanished into FTL, silence fell across Velkara Prime. The defense fleet was shattered. The system was in ruins. But the world still lived. 4 billion Velkari had been saved. Vexthar looked at the human fleet, now barely 100 ships remaining, and felt tears on his scaled face. The debt is paid, he whispered. The battle was over. But the war had just begun. Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the casualty reports. 45% of his fleet was gone. 89,000 human sailors had died, defending a world that most of them had never even seen. Their names would be remembered on Earth forever. But right now, Jiho had to focus on keeping the rest of his people alive. The Hiveborn had retreated, but they had not surrendered. The Queen Mind was ancient and proud, and she had never been defeated before. She would be coming back with reinforcements, and next time, she would be ready for humanity's tricks. Captain Minho Kang brought his damaged ship alongside the flagship. The Retribution's Edge had taken heavy fire during the battle, and half of its crew was dead. But Minho was alive, and his ship could still fight. That was enough. Admiral, we're detecting Hiveborn scouts at the edge of the system, Minho reported. They're watching us. Let them watch, Jiho replied. I want them to see what happens when you threaten our friends. Down on Velkara Prime, Commander Jisoo Han was coordinating relief efforts. Her Marines had landed on the surface to help with rescue operations. They pulled Velkari survivors from collapsed buildings and distributed medical supplies. The Velkari people watched these humans with wonder. These fierce warriors who had just destroyed a Hiveborn fleet were now gently caring for wounded civilians. A young Velkari child approached Jisoo, scales bright with youth. The child held out a small flower, one of the few things that had survived the bombardment. Jisoo took the flower carefully, her armored hand looking massive next to the delicate bloom. Thank you, Jisoo said softly. The child ran back to its parents, who bowed deeply to the human commander. In orbit, High Counselor Vexthar had come aboard the human flagship. He wanted to personally thank the admiral who had saved his world. When he entered the bridge, he saw Jiho staring at the casualty reports with an expression of deep sadness. Admiral, Vexthar said quietly, because of you, 4 billion of my people still live. I can never repay this debt. You already did, Jiho replied. 50 years ago, you made a promise to Captain Taman. You kept that promise by treating Earth with respect when other council members wanted to treat us like animals. Today, we honored that friendship. The council is in chaos, Vexthar said. Many representatives are angry that you violated the treaty restrictions. Some are calling for sanctions against Earth. Let them call for whatever they want, Jiho said. We're done asking permission to do what's right. The Queen Mind of the Hiveborn had retreated to her core world, a planet covered in organic structures that pulsed with psychic energy. She was connected to billions of drones across dozens of systems. But for the first time in her existence, she felt alone. The humans had done something impossible. They had hurt her. She gathered her strongest warriors and began planning her revenge. The humans were immune to psychic control, but they could still be killed. She would return with overwhelming force and crush them. Then she would find their homeworld and destroy it completely. But the Queen Mind made a mistake. She assumed that humans would follow the same rules as every other species. She assumed they would wait for her to attack. She assumed they would fight defensively. Pilot Do-hyun Shin had other ideas. He stood in the briefing room of the carrier, Defiance, with 30 other pilots, all volunteers for what everyone was calling a suicide mission. They were going to attack the Queen Mine directly. Here's the situation, Do-hyun said, pointing to a star map. The Hive-born core world is heavily defended. Thousands of ships, planetary shields, weapon platforms. Nobody has ever successfully attacked it. So obviously we're going to do it, one pilot said with a grin. Obviously, Do-hyun agreed. We're going to use a new weapon. Dr. Hana created it specially for the Queen Mind. Since we can't hurt her with psychic attacks, we're going to hurt her with sound. Dr. Hana's weapon was elegant in its simplicity. The Queen Mind coordinated her empire through psychic frequencies. If those frequencies were disrupted with the right kind of sonic pulse, the entire Hive-born network would collapse into chaos. The weapon would only work if delivered directly into the Queen Mind's chamber, which meant someone had to fly a ship straight through the planet's defenses. Admiral Jiho approved the mission against his better judgment. He knew it was suicide, but he also knew that if they waited for the Hive-born to attack again, more people would die. Better to take the fight to the enemy. The strike force consisted of 50 human ships, all volunteers. They jumped into the Hive-born core system and immediately came under attack. Thousands of Hive-born vessels swarmed them. The human ships fought with everything they had, but this time, they were outnumbered and surrounded. Do-hyun flew his fighter through defensive fire that would have destroyed most vessels. He lost half his squadron in the first minute. But humans had learned something from their history. Sometimes, to win, you had to be willing to sacrifice everything. All ships, cover the Defiance, Captain Minho ordered. His ship was carrying the sonic weapon, and it needed to reach the planet's surface. One by one, human ships threw themselves at the Hive-born defenders. They rammed enemy vessels, detonated their reactors, used every dirty trick they had learned. The galaxy watched in horror as these primitive humans fought with a savagery that defied every rule of civilized warfare. Captain Minho brought the Defiance down through the planet's atmosphere. The ship was damaged and burning, but it kept flying. Minho's crew was dead or dying around him, but he kept the ship on course. In the distance, he could see the Queen Mind's chamber, a massive structure of organic matter that pulsed with psychic energy. For Earth, Minho whispered. For Taemin. For everyone who believed we could be better. The Defiance crashed directly into the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Dr. Hana's weapon activated, sending out a sonic pulse that resonated through the Queen Mind's psychic network. The frequency was perfectly calibrated to disrupt Hive-born neural patterns. The Queen Mind screamed. It was not a sound, but a psychic wail of agony that echoed across every Hive-born ship in the galaxy. Billions of drones suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time. The coordination that made the Hive-born empire powerful shattered in an instant. Across the galaxy, Hive-born fleets stopped moving. Ships drifted in space as their crews struggled to function without the Queen Mind's direction. The empire that had conquered dozens of systems collapsed in minutes. On Velkara Prime, Vexathar watched the reports come in with shock. The humans had done it again. They had achieved the impossible through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice. He opened a communication channel to Earth, needing to speak with whoever was in charge now. Ambassador Sora appeared on the screen. She looked tired and old, but her eyes were bright with pride. Behind her, crowds of humans celebrated in the streets of every city on Earth. High Counselor, Sora said. I hope you're calling with good news. The Hive-born Empire has fallen, Vexthar said. Thanks to your people's courage. But Ambassador, I must tell you something. Many on the Council are frightened now. They've seen what humans can do when you're pushed. Some are talking about trying to contain Earth by force. Sora's smile was cold. Let them try. We're done being caged. In the wreckage of the Defiance, rescue crews found Captain Minho barely alive. He had ejected at the last second, though he had not expected to survive. When they brought him back to the fleet, Admiral Jiho personally pinned a medal on his chest. "You did well, Captain," Jiho said. "I just wanted them to know," Minho replied weakly. The galaxy had learned something important. Humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were something far more dangerous. They were loyal, determined, and absolutely unstoppable when defending their friends. And now, the galaxy had to decide what to do about them. The Emergency Council Summit was the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 150 species filled the Grand Chamber, all talking at once. Some were angry. Some were frightened. All of them wanted answers about what humanity had done. Admiral Jiho Lee stood in the center of the chamber with Ambassador Sora Kim beside him. They were surrounded by aliens who looked at them with expressions ranging from fear to admiration to outright hostility. Jiho kept his face calm, but inside he was preparing for a fight. Not a physical one, but something potentially more dangerous. A political battle. High Counselor Vexthar called the session to order. His voice, amplified by the chamber's systems, silenced the crowd. "We are here to discuss the actions of humanity during the recent Hiveborn crisis. Admiral Lee, Ambassador Kim, you stand accused of violating the treaty that confined Earth to its home system. You deployed a military fleet without authorization. You engaged in warfare without council approval. How do you respond?" Before Jiho or Sora could speak, a representative from the Krell species stood up. Counselor Varn was a massive creature, covered in thick armor plating, and his voice boomed through the chamber. "How do they respond? They should be arrested. They violated every law we have. They're too dangerous to be free." Other voices joined in. "They used nuclear weapons, banned for 300 years. They destroyed an entire empire. They ignored council authority completely. They cannot be trusted." Sora listened to the accusations pile up, her face showing nothing. She had spent 50 years dealing with the council's politics, and she had learned patience. When the shouting finally died down, she stepped forward. "You want to know how we respond?" Sora said quietly. Her voice carried despite its softness. "We respond by asking a question. Where were you?" Great word. The chamber fell silent. "Where were you when the Hiveborn fleet appeared at Velkara Prime?" Sora continued. "Where were you when 4 billion lives hung in the balance? Where were you when High Counselor Vexthar called for help?" "That's not the point," Counselor Varn shouted. "We violated nothing that mattered," Sora interrupted. Her eyes were cold. "You want to talk about laws? Let's talk about the law that says the Council protects its member worlds. Where was that law when the Velkari were dying?" Yuna Park stepped forward, carrying a datapad. She had been silent until now, but she had prepared for this moment. "We have recordings," she said. "From the emergency session, where I presented evidence of the Hiveborn attack. Would the Council like to hear them?" Vexthar looked at her with something like approval. "Play them. Clay. Play them." The chamber's screens lit up with recordings from 50 years of council meetings. Yuna had compiled every moment where human warnings were ignored, every time Earth's intelligence was dismissed, every instance of council representatives mocking humanity's concerns. The evidence was damning. One recording showed Counselor Varn himself, laughing at Sora's warning about the Hiveborn. Humans offering military advice? How amusing. The Krell Counselor's armor plates shifted with what might have been embarrassment. "For 50 years, you treated us like children," Jiho said, his voice hard. "You stole our innovations and sold them for profit. You kept us caged while pretending it was for our own good. You ignored our warnings because you could not imagine that primitives might know something you did not. And when the moment came," Sora added, "when lives needed saving, we did not wait for your permission. We did what you should have done. We acted." A representative from the aquatic Nereida species spoke up. Her voice was calmer than the others. "But Admiral, you must understand our concern. You deployed a fleet we did not know existed. You possess weapons we thought were destroyed. You fought with a brutality that shocked even veteran warriors. How can we trust that you will not turn these capabilities against us?" Round. It was a fair question, and Jiho respected it. "You can't," he said simply. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. But Jiho raised his hand for silence. "You can't trust us any more than we can trust you. Trust is not given. It's earned. For 50 years, you did not trust us enough to let us be equals. Now, we don't trust you enough to ask permission before doing what's right." Quote. Vexthar stood slowly. The old Velkari had been silent until now, but everyone knew his words would carry weight. "I have something to say." The chamber fell silent. 50 years ago, 2 humans nearly died saving this council station. You all remember that day. They were young, inexperienced, and had every reason to run. Instead, they stayed and saved 47,000 lives. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "Last month, when my world was dying and every council fleet was too far away to help, humanity came. They did not ask for payment. They did not negotiate terms. They simply came because I asked them to. Because 50 years ago, I made them a promise, and they honored it. They're monsters." Someone shouted from the upper levels. "Did you see what they did? They used their own ships as weapons. They are heroes," Vexthar said firmly. "They paid in blood to save lives that were not their own. 90,000 humans died defending Velkara Prime. They died for us, for people they had never met, on a world they had never seen. That is not monstrous. That is noble." Jiho pulled out his own datapad. "Since we're sharing information, here's something interesting. For the past 30 years, Earth's intelligence network has been mapping council space. We know the location of every military installation, every defensive platform, every fleet position. We've known for decades." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Several representatives stood, their expressions panicked. Jiho's revelation was a bombshell. If humanity had that much intelligence, they could strike anywhere in council space. "This is an act of war," Councillor Varn roared. "No," Jiho said calmly. "It's an act of survival. You locked us in our system and thought we would just sit there, helplessly. Instead, we watched. We learned. We prepared, not to attack you, but to make sure we could never be destroyed by you." Dr. Hanasong appeared on the communication screen, broadcasting from Earth. She had insisted on being part of this discussion. "I want to make something clear," she said. "We discovered that humans are immune to hive-borne psychic control. That immunity gave us an enormous advantage. We could have used it to conquer. We could have let the hive-borne destroy council worlds and then swooped in to take control of the survivors." She paused, letting that sink in. "We didn't. We chose to save lives instead of take them. We chose to honor our friendships instead of exploit weakness. Remember that when you judge us, Rend, we chose to 70 ride. We chose to 70 ride. To 70 ride. We chose to 70 ride. We chose to 70 ride." Ambassador Sora stepped forward again. "The Council can choose to continue treating us as prisoners. You can try to force us back into our system. You can attempt to restrict us with laws and treaties. But understand this." Her voice became steel. "We are done asking permission. We will expand when we choose. We will defend our friends when they need us. We will ignore laws that are unjust. And if you try to stop us by force, you will discover exactly how effectively humans can fight." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Several representatives looked ready to call for military action against Earth. Others looked uncertain. The galaxy had just witnessed humanity destroy an empire that had terrorized council space for decades. Nobody wanted to find out what humans could do if they were truly angry. Vexthar called for a vote. The question before the council is simple. Do we continue humanity's restrictions? Or do we grant them full membership with all rights and privileges? Unlows. The voting process was tense. Representatives argued and debated. Some species threatened to leave the council if humanity was given full membership. Others threatened to leave if humanity was not. The discussion lasted for hours. Finally, the votes were counted. 147 species voted in favor of full human membership. 3 species abstained. 0 voted against. Even Councillor Varn, despite his bluster, had voted yes. Nobody wanted to be on humanity's bad side. When the results were announced, Sora felt tears on her face. After 50 years of fighting, of being dismissed and mocked and restricted, Earth was finally free. Jiho simply nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. But Jiho had one more thing to say. We accept the Council's membership, he said. But we want to be clear about something. We didn't want to be feared. We wanted to be respected. You've given us fear. We'll have to earn the respect ourselves. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Hive-born Empire formally surrendered, their queen mind permanently damaged by Dr. Hana's weapon. Multiple species that had previously mocked humanity now desperately sought human protection agreements. Earth's technology became the most valuable commodity in the galaxy, and this time, humans controlled the trade. 10 years later, human colonies spread across 40 systems. The phrase, "Don't make them call in a debt," became a common saying in galactic politics. When conflicts arose between species, they often called for human mediators, because nobody wanted humans to take sides against them. Jiho retired from the military and became Earth's ambassador to the Council. He worked alongside Vexthar, who remained High Counselor for another decade before passing away peacefully. At Vexthar's funeral, Jiho gave the eulogy. He saved us when we had nothing, Jiho said. He treated us with dignity when others saw only primitives. He kept his promise when it would have been easier to forget. The galaxy could learn from his example. Earth Defense Force ships carried a new motto on their hulls, visible to anyone who saw them pass. We remember those who stood with us. We remember those who didn't. And first, humanity had settled its debt. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Underestimate humans at your own risk. Mock them, and they will prove you wrong. Threaten their friends, and they will show you what fury looks like. But stand with them, honor them, treat them with dignity, and you will have allies who will cross the galaxy to save you. Humanity always remembered who stood with them, and they always kept their promises.